Be yourself positive. Just another mindset.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a new episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast. We need a paradigm shift if it comes to our economic and social systems. Let us drive this change together. The Just Another Mindset podcast shares inspiration and tangible techniques on how to create seismic shifts in an outdated system, collectively and for individuals alike. My name is Ismael, and each week I bring to you a relevant conversation, message, or theme that will not only entertain you, but help you to change towards a more meaningful and satisfying life. Get encouraged by listening to successful thought leaders, inspiring individuals, and impressive changemakers. Change from within will last and create positive results for all of us. Let us get inspired and embrace collective changes for the better. This is a very personal episode to me, as you will hear about a project that is very near to my heart. In fact, it's not only a project, but rather a decision to live your or my life. The decision to live in balance with nature and to regenerate. Giving back to our planet and cultivating the beauty that planet Earth has gifted us with. At the time of the recording, my almost 2 month stay at the traditional Dream Factory in Portugal is coming to an end, and we celebrate together. You will hear about the celebration during the episode. This episode is also special because this is the very first episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast that is recorded in person. So make sure to check the video version of this podcast and get a glimpse of the beautiful land in Abela, Portugal, from which we are recording. Sam is an amazing human being who I call a brother. He's a visionary and a network builder. He believes in regeneration and giving back to the planet. In this episode, we talk about regeneration and community. I spent the 2 months prior to the recording in a place called Traditional Dream Factory, and today you will learn all about it. We discussed the desire to regenerate, what regeneration even means, and what role technology plays in it. You will learn about governance, networks of communities and villages, and people. We elaborate on challenges and success stories along the way, and you will hear about our very reasons to live in co-created playgrounds and community. Finally, you will learn about the ocean, digital nomads, union, and hope. Wonderful. And with that, Sam, a warm welcome to a very special episode of the Just Another Mindset podcast. Today recording in person in Portugal. And my first question for you today is, how do you feel and what is on your mind?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and such a pleasure to have had you around the land for the last month and a half or something. So yeah, super excited to be chatting. I guess at the moment I'm feeling overwhelmed and excited at the same time, but also calm.
That's a very interesting combination, and I'm very sure we're going to talk a little bit about why you feel overwhelmed, excited, and calm at the same time. But before we go into the great details there, I was wondering, Sam, what does regeneration mean to you?
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely a question that's been coming up a lot the last few years, as we've been asking ourselves that at TDF, at Traditional Dream Factory. Yeah, the way that I like to define it is because I don't like to get into all the woo-woo stuff too much. So I like to kind of stay real, and to me, regeneration is creating the opportunity to sustain life for the long term. So like looking at longer vision, like not just for the next 10 years, 50 years, but really looking how we can sustain it for forever, or as much as forever means, and how can we restore biodiversity and ecosystems that have been degenerated, conserving water. So for me, it's a lot about the nature regeneration. I would say that's like, yeah, one of the one of my core values is has become around this, and I identify myself as a regenerative entrepreneur at the moment. So
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And you already stated that this has become your passion, or that this has become one of your values. And in a private conversation, you mentioned to me that your parents met in Christiana in Copenhagen. And I would be very interested if you can give a little bit of a context about your upbringing and maybe also what Christiana or the hippie movement had to do with that.
yeah, sure. So I mean, yeah, it is kind of funny that I ended up a little bit on the same track as where my parents were going, but I think with a little bit of a different approach. But basically, yeah, they were the back to the land movement from the 70s. That's what they grew up with, and yeah, my dad discovered rainbow gatherings at some point, and then that became his life. He hopped into that and started organizing them, and really meeting with, I think especially back then, like the Native American tribes and so on, really kind of embracing some of the norms and traditions. He also worked on like a project in the suburbs of Paris with an Indian from Quebec. But yeah, so that was kind of his world. And then I grew up in a national park in the south of France. Very peaceful place. It's like a chestnut forest. There's beautiful rivers, and it's an area called Cévennes, so it actually has also a bit of a history. Um, the Protestants used to go there when they were persecuted by the king back a few hundred years ago, and since then you had this history of slightly rebellious people ending up living there. Um, and yeah, that was kind of where I grew up, and then moving back and forth between France and Denmark. I did go to rainbow gatherings a few times as a kid. We did travel around for that a little bit. And then when I was 7, my parents broke up, and then I was, yeah, living in France most of the time. But then I, yeah, moved to Denmark at 15 again, and then, yeah, finally when I was 23, I guess, 23, yeah, I moved to New York and kind of, yeah, started living there, working in tech for a few years there.
And you already hinted a little bit at a different approach that you have or that you had on regeneration or on going back to the land than the one of your parents. And I think one key component of that is indeed New York and technology. So maybe what is the difference in an approach that you have, that you and your surroundings currently have in regard to regenerating the land than what you stated the movement in the 70s maybe had?
So I think one of the things that defined the hippie movement from the 60s and 70s was this desire to break out from society and to start something completely new. And so these communities tended to be much more secluded. And I guess there was much more difference back then between the corporate world in the city and the rural world in a community. But I think today's gap has been narrowing thanks to like satellite internet, remote work, and all these kind of things. Now you're able to have whatever life you want. You don't have to fit in a special category because of your geographic location. So I think that has enabled, yeah, like a new generation of eco villages to arrive, which have this focus of not only being ecologically and socially responsible, but also to have an economic engine that can actually fuel it sustainably. Because yeah, that is like one of the key concepts I think is around creating an economic model that really works because it is integrated to society, because we have a goal of, for example, being a net producer rather than an importer of goods. And so that creates more economic freedom for the long run. And so next to this economic specificity, I think what we are adding is this technological layer, which basically enables this economic model. So through things like tokenizing the access rights to the property, and creating like our own governance and access procedures for how you can access real estate. That's, yeah, a little bit something that we're doing different and experimenting with.
I would would be very interested to which regard we can use technology for governance, but also for ownership or non-ownership participation, and where that differs to the models or the communities that have been created over the, let's say, 50 years.
Yeah, so I think what I have observed is a lot of these communities that have been created because they didn't have that drive to have an economic model, because money was taboo, and it was something dirty. It wasn't something that we wanted to be integrated with. That's a little bit my observation of that movement, and also like growing up in like hippie context. Yeah, so one of the things that we're pioneering with is proof of presence. So it's basically trying to abstract the layer of governance that we want to develop within TDF, and it's a layer that says that what gives you sovereignty over making decisions on a place is, for us, it's how much time do you spend here, how much work do you put into it, and then also partially how much of the more economic capital do you own. But really emphasizing those first two aspects. So our governance weight that we're striving to kick off our governance structure with in the summer, hopefully by June or something, we should have that in place, is to have a 5x voting weight on presence, which is a token that we distribute. So for every night that you spend at TDF, you earn one proof of presence. When you do that with tokens, of course, because it's reserved to kind of like this upper subscription for TDF, the upper tier, which is people who are really committed, who are part of the culture, who have been through this kind of cultural integration where we all feel aligned and that we want to share a home, basically. And so, yeah, this proof of presence protocol kind of enables this first Lego block in how can we create decentralized access and governance of real estate. And I think more importantly, what we're really trying to achieve as well is to change our perception of what does ownership mean and transition that into a sense of stewardship. So ownership comes from Latin law, like the rights to own that we currently have defined in our laws comes from the Roman laws, and so ownership was defined as the right to use, the right to get the fruit of, and the right to destroy. And that was taking into consideration back then slaves, like you could own other humans and you could impose those laws on it. You could kill your slaves. That was your right as an owner. And that's not really a value that we want to adhere by. And so we want to go back to a sense of ownership, which is closer to what native tribes and other people that have been caring for the land have been doing over centuries and millennia, which is a sense of stewardship. And stewardship means the rights that comes along with stewardship is a right to care for and the right to get the fruit of. So it doesn't mean that you don't get benefits out of being a steward. So you can still get access to the land, you get access to food, you get access to air, to water, to all of the things that you need, but you don't get the right to destroy the land, for example.
Maybe we can use this word stewardship to go a little bit in a deep dive into TDF, the traditional dream factory, where you stated we have been spending time for the past 7 weeks or so, where I was lucky enough to spend some time with you guys and to get to know the project. And for somebody who has not heard about TDF yet, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think TDF is it's a playground. It's a place for humans to relearn what it means to be human. It's a human to nature interface. It's an experimentation and it's a prototype, and it's a place where we want to build dreams, and it's a place that empowers you to build your dreams. I think everyone who comes here have their own desires and dreams, and I think the common kind of vision is generally regeneration. This is kind of a common understanding that we come here and we have a mission to regenerate this planet in the next 30 years, or we're putting at risk all of our future generations. And so, yeah, so I think bringing stewards together on the land is
It's one major component of that, I hear.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned that TDF is some kind of prototype. So I would be very interested, is TDF the first of many projects? Is TDF the one project that you, as Team TDF, commonly work together with? Or where is the vision of such co-livings, I just want to call it, gonna get us?
Yeah, so what we're building is an ecosystem. So we, like I said before, we broke out the technology into a piece called Closer, which builds a proof of presence protocol so that any other community around the world can use it. But then we also broke down the kind of how do we bring this ownership and stewardship into the legal realm. And so we did that by setting up a Swiss nonprofit that is going to be the ultimate kind of land holder, with the intent to have it act like a land trust. So land trusts don't fully exist in Portugal, but so we decided to set up a structure in Switzerland which can both bridge this gap of serving as a land trust, but also bridge the DAO world to the legal world. And so the Swiss the Swiss legal antecedent makes it that our DAO can be recognized as a real entity that has like a foothold in the real world, which is how we can then link like real estate, like this land, into this token system. And so this piece is what OASA is. OASA is this kind of Earth trust, like some people call it an Earth trust or like a land trust, that seeks to basically take land out of the market in order to regenerate it and conserve it for future generations. We have as an ambition to protect 100,000 hectares globally. So it's quite ambitious, but at the same time, we need a lot more OASAs if we want to be successful in this mission of regeneration. So also everything we're doing, we're open sourcing it. Like TDF is the first prototype. And if you want to learn how TDF works, we are open for collaboration. We are open for sharing the digital platform we're building through Closer. We can have other villages being hosted under the OASA umbrella. So all the pieces are kind of modular and you can pick and choose the one that fit. And the goal of OASA is also to create a little bit of a container of like, how many people do I want to co-own this dream with? So, and our container is a little bit imagining the size of like your global tribe that's living across all of these different OASA lands, peoples that you have ties with, you keep bumping into each other throughout the world. Yeah, and then at the same time, keeping it small enough that it's also intimate and that you can build deeper relationship with. So trying to keep each village within like the Dunbar number of like 150 people, but potentially much less. It could be different kind of sizes, and then trying to really use the economic entities of the villages as a center to actually be able to fund regeneration and to conserve large areas of land. So when we're going to be looking at places like Kenya or South Africa, where it's going to be thousands of hectares of land that we will be looking at if we want to acquire property as OASA, then that's where like really like this learning and having like a concrete idea of how to do regeneration and how to fund regeneration, what kind of things can we do with this, like with these natural assets. And so one of the things that have been coming through the last couple of years is this idea of building a regenerative finance movement that's actually valuing nature for what it is, for providing all of the things and all of the resources that are needed for human survival. And so trying to value again the growth of trees rather than just the timber of the tree, and valuing the restoration of water, the preservation of biodiversity, and all of these things. So we're also making a little bit of a bet that over the next 10 years, what we value as a financial system is going to have to shift towards something that includes more of nature. Otherwise, we're pretty screwed, to be honest. And so, yeah, I think we are like at the kind of inflection point where capitalism is like kind of reaching the end of its course as it is. Maybe it's going to transmute into something different, which includes like nature accounting, whatever, putting numbers on everything. I do also think that by creating this representation of values that's much more flexible in what it actually represents, it also enables us to shift this perspective of money as being like this singular entity into something that's more just surrounding us and that we can interact with, and that serves the purpose of doing something positive, like regenerating our soils.
Thank you very much. I have quite a few follow-up questions, and the first one would be just for our audience who have not heard of DAOs yet. What is a DAO?
Yeah, so a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization. It's basically a fancy term to say a group of people that have a common wallet, like say like a bank account on the internet, and a methodology for governance, which you can always keep evolving. So that's how it becomes a bit more interesting than, for example, democracy, is that instead of having to do simply majority voting, you can get into much more advanced algorithm for how you want to actually take decisions. So yeah, like ours includes like proof of presence, but in more simple DAOs, you might have things like conviction voting, or maybe more complex DAOs too also. But yeah, conviction voting or quadratic voting or different kind of algorithms that can kind of tweak the numbers to be more representative of what kind of output you want to have with your DAO. But yeah, ultimately it's just a common wallet, and basically when you purchase a TDF token, you're putting money into this common wallet, which is our shared treasury, which has the purpose to execute the vision in the white paper, which is described in the OASA website.
And this is basically, again, how you merge technology with regenerative processes differently than what movements or what communities would have done 30, 40, 20 years ago, because the technology for this specific use case was just not there. So it's really just, for my understanding, to make it more transparent, and by having this transparency also somewhat make it very just, and everybody knows, okay, I have this much amount of token, I have this amount of days that I've been on the land, I have worked for this and that many days. So you can basically very transparently calculate your own share, your own voting power, and so forth.
Exactly. Everything is transparent, everything is public, everything that's on chain is public. And so it really enables you to trust in the system, because you can actually go and you can look at how decisions were made. A lot of things are more recorded, and because it's a DAO, it means that it's a group of people making decisions. And so yeah, I guess I can announce now that I'll be stepping down as a director of TDF. And so I took the decision to really try to empower the next generation of entrepreneurs and creatives that want to step up within the TDF ecosystem and really take leadership and ownership of this dream that we have. And because, yeah, my purpose was never to be the manager of like a company. Like, that's not my purpose. My purpose is to regenerate the planet, and I want to keep on doing more of these projects, finding more pathways to connect these different villages around the world, really supporting the ecosystem as a whole that we're creating. And so, yeah, right now I'm going to be more focused on the platform and really developing those features that will be required for this to be scalable. Because how do we replicate this model throughout the world? It's going to be through having like a platform that can enable you to do that. And then having all of the kind of cultural and social and so on norms defined that you can replicate in other places. And yeah, I mean, I think the whole financial aspect and like including natural asset as one of our strategies is going to be more and more attractive for villagers as we grow. And I really believe in this idea that villagers can be the steward of the land. And to be steward of the land in 2050, you're going to need more technological capabilities, and you're going to need it's going to be a bit different than being a farmer in the 20th century. And so I think, yeah, with all the technology that's emerging, I think there's like so many opportunities to actually accelerate regeneration through technology. Whether you're talking about drones, talking about financial systems that can actually reward positive actions, whether you're talking about vertical farming that we're setting up, or we even had a project like Complex Earth, who created a whole 3D render model, computer generated, that actually mapped out our land here at TDF. kind of positioning all the trees that we want to see in a food forest based on their height and their inclination with the sun and so on. The algorithm is still not as good as humans, but as we know with technology, things go fast. And so, yeah, I can see a future where technology just empowers us to be better stewards of the land and where we don't need this mass farming that has been killing our soils for the last century.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Sam. And have been around for roughly 2 months, but I can say from my bottom of the heart, thank you very much for everything that you've done for TDF and with TDF, and that you will also continue to do with TDF. And yeah, you talked about regeneration and you talked about different technologies which we may implement in the future. And we also earlier talked about different places or different regions where we can basically have similar villages, similar communities, similar co-livings, whatever we want to call it. So for my understanding, the types of regeneration would also differ slightly from is it done in Portugal, how is it done in Kenya, how is it done in South Africa. And I would be very interested, is there still some common principles, or is there like one common ground that you say this is what we really agree to in order to become a village of the OASA network, or a community that is basically in that network?
So I think there's two parts to that question. One is like how different is regeneration going to look from one continent to another, and another one is what you agree to as being an OASA village. I can answer the second one first because we have this stated out in our principles of regeneration and land stewardship, that, for example, we want to conserve 50% of the lands, at least, of the project as conservation areas, so rewildering, trying to reintroduce native species, reducing the amount of fences around, and really kind of creating space for nature to grow back. And then out of the other 50%, a maximum of 5% will be used as housing. That is still like a lot of space. Like if you look at a property like TDF, which is 25 hectares, that means 12,500 square meters that we could potentially build. So it's still quite consequent, but it still enables us to conserve 95% of the land as nature. And so the remaining 45% is the permaculture, regenerative agriculture kind of edible landscape. So that's the part about what does actually mean to join OASA, to create an OASA village. So that's like one of the things, but then we also list like how we want to basically care for the land and not just use pesticide and not just chop down trees, and like just like kind of general guidelines, which are more to be, let's say, used as principles, because those things again will probably be different, and maybe at some point it would make sense to use pesticide or whatever, like as long as you have like a strong scientific reasoning for doing it, and that you're not just repeating all the mistakes we've been doing in 20th century, then there can be times when those things can be challenged and it can evolve over time, but it's also really designed to kind of stay immutable over time as much as possible. So it's designed to be the hardest thing to change in our kind of political legislative area. And about how different would regeneration look like across different bioregions. That's exactly the point of OASA. Is actually we want to have prototypes in all the different kind of political, social, economical, and ecological context, so that we can actually have those diverse prototypes that can then be reused. I think it's gonna take, and that's the thing with OASA, is we're not like defining ourselves as like a small team or whatever. It can be, anyone can be part of this dream and can come and join us and can come and stay at TDF for some time, and then they can go back to their home country and start a similar project. So for us, it's about finding who is our aligned tribe globally that we want to co-create with, and then finding people who are willing to be those stewards and figuring out what it actually takes to regenerate their land. And of course, there's a lot of best practices that can be re-implemented globally, technologies that will be available globally, and so on. So I think with every project, it's going to get easier and easier, but we're also going to collect more data along the way.
And is this then somewhat like open source, that this will be shared through the OASA network in terms of resources of knowledge and resources also of technology?
Yes, I mean, we try to be as basically as open source as possible. So like our handbook is public, all of our documents, our legal documents, everything is public. So if someone really wants, they can go and dive as deep as they want, pretty much. Like you have to do a bit of diving, and there's a lot of documents and things that you can go into. But for the most part, we try to be as public as possible. And again, it's about building the closer platform, which is also going to be available to any village around the world, which is meant to spread actually even faster than OASA, because OASA still has this limited kind of capacity to fit a certain group of humans that want to live together on this planet together. Whereas closer can be applied to any village from any kind of network. But yeah, we want to also keep getting better at it, and it's a really tough job to build a village. There's like so many areas that you need to touch, from permaculture to bioconstruction to technology, economic systems, legal infrastructure, and so on. So there's just like a lot of topics, and yeah, I think the way that it's been happening so far is really organically people showing up that maybe want to document something, maybe want to record a podcast, maybe want to write a book. And so, for example, last year we wrote this book. So that is one way that we can transfer this knowledge to other generations of village builders is, through producing content like books or videos and podcasts and so on. And we want to get into that more and more to really be able to accelerate this movement.
No, absolutely. Information sharing. And I would be very interested, Sam, you talked about challenges, but you also talked about success stories in a way. And I don't know what comes to mind when you look back at the last, you've been on the land for almost 2 years, but the idea behind traditional Dream Factory is even bigger, and even OASA, it's like even longer. What were maybe unforeseen challenges, some that you did not see coming, because those are usually the ones that take us unprepared? And then maybe in the second part of the question would be, what are also very great success stories, what you're super happy, proud, and excited about?
I think on both sides of that coin is people. It's I mean, it's really quite an adventure to try to create a coordination system that can host so many people and in a structure that is completely different from, say, corporate, and that cannot be the size of a family either, because you have to reach like a certain numbers basically and scale. So how to coordinate people, how to maintain engagement. I think a lot of people see this idea as sexy, like they like the concept, they want to take part of it, they want to do it. A lot of people want to start villages, but then when it comes to doing the dirty work, then it's a bit harder to always like keep the motivation for a long period of time that's required. And to do a project of like transforming land is like 7 years, let's say, to really regenerate and restore an ecosystem. So it's not something that you can just do overnight, and you have to maintain consistency. And some challenges I think is, for example, how much knowledge gets lost when someone moves on. And so when we're talking about land regeneration, and we have someone doing a food forest and someone else doing another piece of land, and then they move on and someone else comes in, and you have this like constant flux of knowledge and ideas and opinions on how to do it. I think it's already hard enough when you're trying to just do it with one advisor. I mean, like Big Little Farm, for example. And then when you're trying to do this in a decentralized manner, you really, really have to think about those systems. And I think it's been both a struggle, but also, so many learnings. And I think we've grown so much from being together, and by sharing so much of our life together, from work to living to our relationships. And basically when you live in a village together, that you're building together, that you're in the same team, you get to like a really strong level of bonding. And it's just been really beautiful to see the team that's come together here. And like last year, going to Gathering of the Tribes, which is a sister event to Rebuild, and just like feeling this cohesion that we built together, like spending 3 months as a stewardship team last summer, for example. And you really get to like a really deep sense of connectivity with your peers. And I think you start to work a little bit toward a sense of purpose and belonging. And I think that was what we wanted all along, is like to actually build purpose and belonging. It's not by getting the easy reward that you're gonna get it. It's by doing the hard work, by running into issues, running into conflicts, being in tough situations, and having to solve problems together.
And I believe running into challenges and issues and also success stories with yourself and then with all the other people, right? And I would be interested, Sam, like lately I've been hearing myself a few times saying like living in a community or in a place like TDF is more difficult, but it's also much more rewarding. What your thoughts would be on that?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's yeah, it is definitely. I mean, it's something that's really hard, right? Finding this balance between privacy and community. I think we all struggle, and depending where you're on the spectrum, from like introverted to really extroverted, and at different moment of the year or different moment of your life, you also be at different areas of the spectrum, right? And so finding the right balance is really tough, and that's something that we had in mind from the beginning. So really trying to, yeah, to kind of create both enough spaces that feel private and spaces that are public. But right now, for example, I guess it's been much more on the public side because, for example, it's all living glamping tents inside an existing building, and you have like outdoor showers and so on and so on. Whereas where we want to go is somewhere that's like a little bit more in between, where you get a bit more space for yourself, and slowly also being able to move into a bit more co-housing. And so I think just having this range of options, like how social do I feel like at this moment in my life or in this moment in time, um, and being able to kind of choose from that. And yeah, I mean, I can see it for myself. Like, I love being here, and sometimes it's also really tough on me because I'm learning a lot, and obviously, like as a founder, I also get a lot of questions, a lot of like this constant like mental capacity that's being required to to think about all of these things. But yeah, I wouldn't go back.
So, how do you personally retreat when you want to integrate the experience that you got on the land or also off the land? Is it that you go into nature? Is it the exact opposite that say you go into a town? What comes to mind?
I guess a bit of both. Like, I mean, for me, the ocean is really what calms my nervous system. I love being at the ocean. So even when we're at TDF, sometimes I like to go to the ocean, which is like 30 minutes away. And yeah, at the moment I don't have a vehicle, so it makes it a bit harder. But getting like, I think, private time by the ocean, I think it's a nice one. But also at the moment I'm living in Lisbon with my partner and just kind of enjoying having a big apartment just for ourselves and having this privacy, which feels good after 2 years of mostly communal living. But I think it's nice to have this kind of balance and being able to transition in between them. And yeah, next week I'm going to be going to the Azores with my friend Michal, who has been stewarding here last summer. And yeah, I think that's going to be very relaxing, and being out in the Azores woods, that's also going to be very relaxing.
Yeah, I bet it will be. I also had a very interesting conversation with Nihao about the Azores and about the proximity of the ocean. Indeed, do you have any clue why the ocean is so special to you? Because you said you grew up in a national park and there was no ocean nearby, right?
I don't know. I think I must have been a pirate in a previous life. Yeah, no. I mean, I I had a boat when I was in New York, and I was living on it in the summers, and I learned to sail, and um, yeah. Well, I was always also going free diving and scuba diving with my dad growing up in the south of France, going to like all the little islands. And I also used to go to the ocean in like near Biarritz. So also enjoying the waves. So I guess I did grow up in water, and like also the rivers around are beautiful. Used to do canyoning. We have like a canyon right next to the house where I grew up, basically. And so yeah, always kind of enjoy this outdoor adventure water.
Wonderful. Are there already some thoughts in your visionary brain about having a community on the water with different boats or swimming houses or something?
Yeah, for sure. It's been part of the dream since the beginning. I mentioned that, yeah, even before OASA was OASA, like I started this spreadsheet actually as the first thing for people to sign up for a hackership where you would buy like a 100-bedroom tall mast boat and start like a kind of on the water co-living. And it didn't happen, and I think it's quite ambitious because it's a lot of work to maintain such a ship. But yeah, we're starting to have quite a few people in the network who also have this common dreams, from Piratas de Amor and Michal and some others. So I have high hopes that that dream will get realized, and I don't have to own it, but I want to take part of it for sure.
No, absolutely. I could imagine it's also somewhat interesting, let's just call it, to have 100 people on one boat, because here on the land, for example, on TDF, you can still retreat into nature or just go for a walk for yourself, but that might be slightly more difficult if you're on a boat, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I did after wanting to do that was I then listed out like what are some projects that are actually existing on the water, and I found like a few different sailing projects and whatnot, and I found this community called Nomad Cruise, which was basically going across the Atlantic with 200 to 500 nomads, and so it's like a floating conference for 2 weeks, and you're stuck on a ship together. And I mean, I had some of the best connections from that event. From those events, I went three times, and I think there's something about being stuck on a ship together that really builds some bonds. And so yeah, I would definitely see that happening more and more in the future, and also being able to choose to navigate around the globe in this slow way that's more adventurous rather than just taking a plane. And I believe in the future time will be abundant, because hopefully by then AIs will be doing all of our jobs. And so that would free us from time and being able to just travel from place to place, living in places like here in Portugal, maybe traveling down to another OASA property in South Africa by sail, and just taking the time to adventure and to connect. That's my dream.
Wonderful. I love that vision. And just one quick follow-up question I have on that. Are any people that you met on that very boat or during the 3 times that you went on this cruise, I just want to call it, are now associated with TDF or are part of TDF? Like you talked about strong bonds, are some of them around?
Yeah, for sure. A couple of them are coming tonight, Becky and Lorenzo. Who else is here? I feel like this community has been like so intermingled with with what I've been doing the last few years that actually, like a lot of them, like Pam, who has been with us since the early days, and Cho, and I mean, it's a big community now, like the digital nomad scene, and a lot of them are familiar with Nomad Cruise. And like in Lisbon, you have like so many digital nomads, so quite a few of them have been kind of coming through and weaving through, and
And I have a few questions that I ask each and every of my podcast guests, but before we go there, is there any topic or theme that you understand we haven't really talked in great detail today, and where you would like to shine a little bit of light?
I guess this is an open invitation for anyone to come and play at TDF, and kind of opening up this token sale is like really inviting the world to co-create this home together now. And it's also saying that, hey, like we've been spending 2 years building these systems, and we think they're good enough for you all to come in. So and we'll be looking for a lot of people to kind of hop onto this movement and reproduce those systems around the world, and creating more villages. And
And I can definitely recommend to come and dream and collectively grow and learn. And it's been very pleasant here. So thank you very much for embarking that dream at some point. And maybe that leads us to the final 3 questions that I have. And the first one, Sam, is what is it that makes you hopeful?
I think, well, like, I guess I think about climate. That's the first thing that I think about, because a lot of people have this doomerist view of climate, and that's one area where I would say is that I'm generally pretty hopeful, because I see the potential, and we have the technology, we have the means, everything is there. We just have to grab the chance while we have it. And so that's really my hope, is that through using technology and through really connecting with regeneration as a common purpose, that's going to make our lives a lot more interesting, and I think it can create the background that's required to give us a sense of purpose, and to maybe restore some of the lost pieces that we lost when we stopped believing in God over the last few hundred years, because we kind of lost this sense of religion and something higher than us. So maybe this new era of artificial intelligence and planetary regeneration that we have to step into, maybe that will bring us into a new sense of meaning.
I like that. Thank you very much. And the second question that I have, and I would be interested, is who are your mentors, or whom do you personally look up to?
I mean, I think everyone that has been contributing with TDF has been really inspirational. We talked about Michal a few times. I was on a call with him yesterday. Had some really nice conversations around these topics, and me stepping down and so on. And yeah, through Michal also, like, we had some really inspiring conversation with folks from Spiral, for example. And I think we've kind of been in this web of like different networks, and so there's just like an abundance of amazing people that are around that are able to support. Like, I'm thinking of my rebuild team, Victor, Anton, Annie, who co-founded TDF. So many inspiring people with really different background, and I think I really thrive on this diversity of being able to tap into kind of different ideas to make my own conclusions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that, and indeed a big shout out to everyone. And that leads us for the last and final question for today's podcast episode, and it's a rather hypothetical one. And I call it the 3 truths. So Sam, I would like you to imagine that you're traveling all by yourself in space for quite some time. Could be a couple of months, could even be a couple of years. And after all that solo travel, you encounter a human-like species, but they can only process 3 facts about humanity before they decide whether or not they want to get to know us. What is it that you tell them?
3 facts. I think I would tell them that we are the most playful apes on planet Earth. To take us with a bit of warning. And that we're pretty good at solving problems.
Playfulness, a little bit of caution, and problem solving. Sam, thank you so much. I very much enjoyed our conversation, and again, a big shout out to each and everybody to come and visit TDF and be part of this very dream. I certainly am. And with that, Sam, if there's any final message or final words that you have for our audience today, it's all yours.
Well, I want to thank you. Thank you for being here, for building the dream, for making this beautiful mobile chicken coop that we now have. And yeah, super excited to have you become a member very soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you.
If you enjoy this podcast and learn from it, please feel free to share this episode with a friend or two, and make sure to subscribe to the Just Another Mindset podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please use the next 10 seconds to give the Just Another Mindset podcast a rating, and know that you will help me to create more meaningful content like this, and also that it will help other people to find this content and get inspired as well. If there is any future topic or guest that you would like to hear more about on the Just Another Mindset podcast, please let me know by leaving a comment on YouTube or sending a mail directly to contact@ismaelwondergarten.com. And if nobody told you lately, be reminded that you are worthy, you matter, and you can achieve anything.
Be yourself positive. Just another mindset.